Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date. My name is Erich Kurschat. I'm the owner of Harmony Insights, LLC, a company that allows me to work with organizations and consultants to use the DISC personality assessment with their employees and their clients. Something that's actually very helpful right now as people are working remotely. You can engage them through assessments and online facilitation, all using the DISC personality assessment. So I nerd out about that, as people who know me are very well aware. I am also the founder of HR Hot Seat, an inclusive mastermind community of HR professionals, over 2,400 of whom belong to a local chapter, one of 10 local chapters around the country. And we have free mastermind style conversation on a monthly basis, these days online, as you can imagine. That's all at hrhotseat.com. For purposes of today's conversation, I, along the way, thought, I just feel so pulled down by so much that's happening in the world right now, and I could really use some inspiration from colleagues and friends who inspire me. And Tatyana Fertelmeyster, our featured guest today, is both a friend and a colleague who inspires me. So it's fitting that she is joining me for this conversation. I could say so much about Tatyana when I have her introduce herself, but just before she does, I just want to say that she has been so helpful to me, especially within the HR Hot Seat community. I met Tatyana, I think, first through our involvement in Chicago SHRM, if I remember correctly, and she became an active member of HR Hot Seat. And we have had so many inspiring conversations, and her insight and encouragement and motivation and willingness to participate in what we do and serve our members has just been extraordinary. So she quickly rose to the top of the list of the people that I wanted to have join me for a Harmony Insights lunch date. So Tatyana, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Make a move if you hear me okay. Good.
Yeah, we see some nodding heads.
Wonderful.
Could you give us a little bit of context for why you were the perfect person to have talking about this particular topic today, about navigating life transitions?
Absolutely. My work is in intercultural and diversity field. I'm a consultant. I run the company that's called Connecting Differences, and my approach to work is wherever there are people, there are differences. And my life experience and my work experience has a lot to do with transitions, life transitions, cultural transitions, work-related transitions. Half a life ago, I came to Chicago from what back then was still Soviet Union. I came as a refugee. My first job was in refugee resettlement. Then I went back to school and got a degree in mental health counseling. And what is mental health counseling if it's not about all kinds of transitions and changes that people go through? And then I got more and more interested in cultures and differences and things like that. And my work started focusing on how do people find themselves in the new realities of life. Yeah, while being a counselor, I did a lot of work in grief counseling. Strangely enough, you say, grief enjoyable, but I found it to be really enjoyable when I could be instrumental in helping somebody through the grief process. And it also taught me to look at any kind of change in life as something that is a loss in itself and calls for certain grief. Even if I change a job that I hate to the job that I really love, I lose certainty of misery. I lose knowing, kind of having familiarity. I'm stepping into unknown, and it calls for a certain degree of processing. Right now, I think we as just humankind are going through a huge transition and, in a sense, a huge loss. As they say, you can only lose your innocence once. We just had the collective loss of innocence. The life without coronavirus doesn't exist anymore. And it's now a new life that we don't know yet all the details of it. And in the midst of it, there are a whole lot of personal transitions, something very related to what happened. Somebody, lost a job. Somebody, God forbid, is dealing with coronavirus affecting their loved ones, or, family or themselves. So there is kind of the direct impact. But also there are all kinds of personal transitions and organizational transitions that happen kind of in the milieu of what's going on. A couple weeks ago, I was maybe a little earlier before we were told to stay home in Illinois and not drive anymore. But when we were kind of already getting there, I was driving by the place that said, some cafe, grand opening. And I was like, what a wrong time for somebody to just open their business.
Right.
I'm working with a colleague who is pregnant right now.
Yeah.
What a challenging time to go through such personal transitions. So there are transitions very much driven by this coronavirus, and there are plenty of transitions that are happening kind of in its presence and get affected by it.
I feel like there are a number of people that are joining us today that think of transition in terms of their professional world and the jobs that they have and the work that they do. And I think that's a common conception of transition. But and I certainly want to make sure we're touching on that today. But I also love this idea that we are always in transition. The only, what is it said? The only certain thing is change, and so we are all in the process of changing from one thing to another, becoming something new, moving from point A to point B, however you want to see it. And so I think this topic of transition is so timely. By the way, it looks like a lovely day under this tree that you're sitting
in New Mexico.
How about that?
I have a whole collection of fun backgrounds.
I promised people a meaningful, actionable conversation today, and so very quickly I want to get into the challenges that people are facing. You've already started to outline what some of those are, and I have some anecdotes to contribute myself, but then also get to make sure that we end on how people can take action currently in their lives related to any transition that they may be in, so that this conversation is immediately actionable. Even in 30 minutes, people can walk away with something that they can implement immediately in their lives. Would you be willing, just very briefly, to share, you talked about how this has impacted, coronavirus has impacted other people. Would you be willing to share how it has impacted you personally in the last several weeks?
It impacted me in a variety of ways. I have 3 people in my family who are essential workers. And there is a certain degree of anxiety about what my husband, who is a truck driver, is driving through. And my daughter, who is a nurse, who is not yet in the emergency room, but is looking at possibility of going back there. She worked there for years, anytime now. And so these are kind of the things that get me worried. My son has just informed me that he is now furloughed for the unknown period of time. So those are the things that are just kind of happening close to home. But I think that in so many ways, coronavirus is affecting me through what I would call the biggest gift of transitions. And the biggest gift of transitions for me is that it kicks us off automatic pilot. And we all of a sudden start paying attention to things and start seeing things that we haven't seen before. Yeah? Some years ago, I took a class in photography. It was before we were all digital and doing it on the phones. And I remember the instructor saying to us, a couple of weeks from now, be careful driving, you will start seeing things you haven't seen before. And I remember driving, so, oh, it's a flower, you know. So all of a sudden, I am paying attention to things, I'm seeing things that I haven't seen before. And I think that will stay with me as my kind of life learning. from this period of time. I'll share just one thing with you. I've been thinking a lot about this whole who is essential, who is not essential, what does it mean to be able to stay home, not to be able to stay home. And my brain kind of works in metaphors. And what came up to me was this idea that, you know how when you watch a Hollywood action movie, yeah, and the main character gets killed, it's a big deal, yeah. Before that, bodies were flying all over the place, you know, blown. That didn't matter. Those are extras, yeah. There are all these essential workers right now who've always been extras in our lives, yeah. Nobody is an extra in their own life. Each one of us is a main character in our life, yeah. And we also may be supportive characters in a few other movies, but nobody is an extra in their own lives. And I think the situation that we're in right now, as much as we first of all focus on, is my family okay, what's going on with my job, you know, things like this, but also as a human being, what am I living through? Hopefully once in a lifetime experience, what is it teaching me? What is it what kind of new clarity it is giving me? The other thing that was so powerful for me in this coronavirus thing that I think is very relevant for what I want to share today. I work from home. I've been working from home for a long time, sort of, unless I'm with clients on client side. In some ways, not that much changed for me. And I found myself for a couple of weeks in a state of almost like paralysis. I don't know, what is going on? And it reminded me yet again, as you know, I kind of discover it in every transition, like maybe I'll finally remember it. A great wisdom that was originally introduced by a man whose name is William Bridges. He wrote a book, Transitions. There is a 25th anniversary edition out there, so the book has been around for a long time. He made huge variety of contributions to understanding of transitions. One of the most important ones is that transition has three parts. Any transition has three parts. Something ends. Maybe it ends by choice, maybe it ends because you were laid off, or you know, something else happened to you, but things end. And then something else begins, again, either by choice or you are pushed into some new reality, you know, somebody got sick in your family and this is your new reality, not by choice. Some people are really good at ending things. Some people are really good at starting things. There are some people who are really good at both. Hardly anybody is good at the middle part that is referred to as neutral stage or limbo. Yeah, the good way to envision it is here is a caterpillar, here is a butterfly, and something happens in the middle, yeah? You can't see what's happening in this cocoon. It feels like nothing is going on. It feels like this paralysis, but some very, very, very important development happens. I think what happened for a lot of people in this coronavirus situation, especially people who switched very quickly to working from home, there was this tendency to jump over, like, okay, you know, I was sitting in front of computer here, now I'm sitting in front of computer here, let's keep going, let's keep going. We didn't really give our sense time and space, many of us, those who didn't have a luxury to really focus on what happened here. Mm-hmm. How do I readjust myself? Yeah, I see a lot of that happening with people, for example, who go through international transition. I'm excited, and you think, oh my God, now it is really happening. Reality sinks in. And when reality sinks in, there is a tendency to go down and to feel kind of depressed and to feel like this is such a normal thing. This is where things need to happen. So
It
Oh,
almost sounds like you're suggesting that we leave space for the various stages of grief that you learn about, that there's so much grieving. And you mentioned this word earlier, which is why I come back to it, that there's so much grieving that really is necessary to bridge that gap between what has ended and what has yet to begin. One of my favorite quotes when I'm trying to be optimistic is, what does this make possible? So when
mhm,
I'm so frustrated, or I feel this sense of loss and I'm sort of down about things, if I can ask and truly believe and engage with this question of, what does this make possible?
mhm.
I feel like it gives me a new perspective on
That's
what's
a
taking
great
place.
question.
I've shared this already, and this certainly does not compare in the least to the grief that many people are feeling because of the loss of loved ones, et cetera. But people often know me as a classical singer. I do a lot of classical singing in a couple of choirs in Chicago, and we had prepared an entire season for Bach's St. John Passion, which is 2 hours entirely in German, a lot of music. And we got to the point where we were ready to perform. And that's when this all happened. And so we were coming together for these dress rehearsals and hearing our conductor say, we're not going to have an opportunity to perform this. This is it. What we are doing tonight for this dress rehearsal is the only time
Mhm.
that we will be able to share this music, and not with an audience, but with each other. And it made it really, really intense. And so, we were kind of bummed out, and we went our own way, and we're trying to figure out and kind of grapple with what was going on. And a grief set in thereafter that I've never experienced with music before. Music has made me feel all sorts of things, and I've been bummed to miss out on performance opportunities and all sorts of things. But this was the first time that I had really felt a sense of loss related to music. And I
Mhm.
sat there thinking, if I'm feeling this way about having lost an opportunity to share music with other people, how are others feeling who have lost their health, or lost their job, or lost a loved one? And what does that mean for the grieving process before they're in a place to move on and find that new beginning? So I'm so glad, and I took us on a little bit of a detour, but I'm so glad that you mentioned the importance of this in between
Mhm.
piece. Because I would imagine, to retain control over our lives, we want to say, okay, I've lost this thing. What am I gaining to replace it? And then we forget about that middle part.
I, I want to make sure that we also understand, um, yeah, loss of a job is nothing comparing to loss of a life. Loss of an opportunity to sing is nothing to comparing to loss. Every loss is a loss. It's not about whose toothache is more painful. It is about allowing ourselves to experience the pain of our own loss and use it as a space from where we can then extend our empathy to understanding, other losses. But if I deny myself my own reality and I soldier on, then who are you to kind of have a moment around your reality? You should soldier on as well. Soldiering on sometimes is the only thing that you can do. A lot of people are soldiering on right now, like medics, for example. And I expect that there will be a lot of people dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder in healthcare field and in some other field where people are absolutely have to soldier on and don't have a moment to stop and process. So when we have this moment to stop and process, it's so important to do it. I want to share with you one of my favorite quotes. I have a whole collection of quotes about transitions because I work a lot with transitions. But this one comes from William Bridges. And this is what he says: change is situational. Transition, on the other hand, is psychological. It is not those events, but rather the inner reorientation of self or self-redefinition that you have to go through in order to incorporate any of those changes into your life. Without a transition, change is just a rearrangement of furniture. Unless transition happens, the change won't work because it does not take.
That really that reminds me, an earlier lunch date that I had was with Stephanie Waite, who's the president of ACMP Midwest chapter. It's the Association of Change Management Professionals, and she made this distinction between change management and transition management. That change management is one thing, more or less, but transition management incorporates an entirely different skill set. Perhaps it involves different people and a different way of looking at things and going about things. And so that process of transition and that quote is really inspiring. As we look at the 9 or so minutes that we have left, can we begin to talk about, I think we've laid out what change can look like and how it can feel for people, whether it's related to a job or your health or any number of family matters or any number of things. Could we start to lay out how people can gain confidence and control um, as they transition from one thing to another in their lives?
Absolutely. And the word control here is very, very important.
Okay.
A lot of energy is well wasted when we try to control what is not in our control. Yeah. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the Serenity Prayer. I will bring it in anyway. It's my favorite counseling tool and coaching tool. Goes something like this. God grant me serenity not to get involved in things that I cannot change. Grant me courage to get involved in things that I can do something about. And grant me wisdom to know the difference. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in the situation that I find myself in, whatever my transition is, really doing this in my control, not in my control analysis. Yeah. A lot of what is in our control is what do I do with myself? Yeah. How do I deal with my thoughts? If I go into self-blaming, if I go into, all this negative self-talk, can I become aware of it and switch into something a little more positive? Talk it out loud with somebody else, that somebody else can tell me, you kind of sound a little ridiculous here, if needed. What else is in my control? If it's about the job, who do I know, in my network? Whom do I need to remind about myself and my experiences? Whom can I be of help to in their transition, kind of paying it forward in a sense, because people help each other a lot through transitions and through changes. And just because I need help doesn't mean that I cannot be the first one to offer. We all have something to offer. Also, what am I learning about myself? Yeah, I'm actually, as a coach, dealing with a lot of people right now who are having kind of life-changing moments because they've been running on automatic pilot and doing. And all of a sudden they're asking themselves, what I've been doing and the way I've been doing it, do I really want to keep doing it? Or is it the best thing that ever happened to me that my kind of job situation changed right now? Does that allow me a space? On one hand, there are too many people out of work right now. On the other hand, because there are too many of us right now, some changes will be happening. I will be getting my unemployment money a little longer than the people do on the average. Can I use this time to really be honest with myself about what I want to do and how I want to do it? So that kind of gives that space as well. Can I attend to things I haven't had a chance to attend before? Our families are present for us in a different way. Maybe your big transition is that you're working from home, but everybody else is at home as well, and you are kind of focusing on it right now. So what are the lessons that you are learning? Yeah, nobody can take your learning away. Your job can be taken away, your all sorts of things can be taken away from you. Your learning cannot. What you learn is yours. And it is about, can I use some time to learn something in terms of, developing some new skills or strengthening the skills that I already have. There's a ton of stuff out there now. Everybody is offering, different free learning opportunities. Can I do that? But also, can I learn something about myself, including being more mindful of what is my kind of dynamic with transition. Yeah, a
You
few
know, I'm
years, a
oh,
few
sorry.
years, a few years ago, my work ended on me, my job ended on me, and I decided not to look for a new one, but focus fully on my consulting. Back then, I spent months in this limbo. Now I know about the normalcy of limbo, and I reminded myself about it, and I came out of it much, much faster this time, with a lot of energy and figuring out, okay, what needs my skills right now. Did I not know it? I could have still be sitting in it. So learning about your own kind of tendencies of transition,
Yeah.
and what works for you and what maybe works against you, and how you can help yourself to deal with that.
You know, I'm all about the introspection, the work that I do with DISC and helping people identify their communication and personality styles. I don't know that there's much we can do in life with confidence without first looking within and figuring out how we are uniquely wired. Thanks to Jessica for suggesting Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who's a Holocaust survivor. That is a fantastic book. And I'm going to botch this paraphrasing, but he talks about like something having to do with our greatest sort of power is there's a space between what happens to us and how we respond, and our greatest power is our ability to choose what that response is going to be, what happens in that space, and kind of that transition space, almost like you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And realizing that we do have some agency and control, even in the worst of circumstances,
Also
to choose that response.
from that book, one of my favorite quotes that's coming up a lot for me now that I work with a lot of people in transitions: abnormal reaction to abnormal circumstances is normal behavior. So if you don't recognize yourself, there is nothing more normal than having this, I can't recognize myself, when you are going through this, if you are in the midst of transition. Yeah.
I'd like to share something else. And this friend of mine turned me on to this recently, and he's really good with wordplay. You know, we're always doing puns and various things, and I'm big on perspective. He knows that I'm big on just what perspective do you have? How could it change? You know, all of a sudden you're looking behind you at a flower you've passed because you just took a photography class. I took a photography class too, where the guy said, if everybody's facing in one direction, face the other direction and see what they're not seeing. You know, everyone's taking a picture of the Grand Canyon, face the other way and look at the sunset that nobody else is getting a picture of. And that always stuck with me. I'm going to share my my screen briefly. Let's see if you can see this. My friend sent me this anagram. Can everyone see this? You know, an anagram is rearranging the letters in a word. If you rearrange the letters in coronavirus, you get, ooh, I can serve. Are you? And I loved, I mean, it's super cheesy, but I just love the perspective of taking, you know, something that is really getting me down potentially. Now, granted, I'm not being influenced by it, impacted in ways that others are, but to your point earlier, I'm still being impacted by it. And so I think, okay, wait a minute, if I change my perspective, I have the opportunity to serve other folks. And that's where the HR Hot Seat lunch dates was born. It was, how can I bring people together for meaningful connection and productive conversation at a time when I think people need it most? Tatyana,
if I can for a second share my screen also with you, just for 1 second.
All right.
This is what also coronavirus kind of brought for me. I like playing with words, and what I kind of came up with, the C-suite for the times of pandemic.
Maybe we can leave that up while we close here.
Yep. I'll be happy to share it. You can send it to people, but it is a big time for change and for figuring things for ourselves, for our families, for our organizations, for us as humanity. You know, there are lots of opportunities for figuring out if we want to keep doing things as we've always done, or we want to
Mix things up a little bit.
have, have some different approaches.
Well,
Yes.
we've surpassed our time here, and I want to be respectful of people's time. I promised a half an hour, and of course, you can stick around if you want to continue the conversation. But in the case that people need to leave us now, how can they be in touch with you online and otherwise to learn more about the coaching that you do and the perspective that you have on life transitions?
The very easy way is to just find my name on LinkedIn and connect with me. Yeah, just did. Or you can, I can put my email address here. But I think that it's the easiest thing is to connect on LinkedIn. You all have my name if you signed up
Excellent.
for this session today, and we can always connect there.
Well, I really appreciate you being a part of this. If you all enjoyed this conversation and you would like more like this, you can go to harmonyinsights.com/lunchdates to see what else I have scheduled. I'm trying to sneak something in for Monday, just sort of an open conversation for people who are in job transition to talk about what's working, what isn't, and get some support from your peers. So if that's something that interests you, watch harmonyinsights.com/lunchdates for that link, as well as some others that we have coming up. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about mindfulness, a very similar topic, and what we can do to stay calm and find equilibrium in a time of chaos. So that'll be a great conversation. Thank you for joining us, Tatyana.